This is Bone Chillers to disturb your dreams. Dare to join us? Click subscribe, ring the bell. But remember, we cannot guarantee your safety from the nightmares that await. Prepare to be thrilled, chilled, and filled with a sense of dread you'll find nowhere else. Welcome to the darkness. We've been waiting.
The Wreck of the Lorelei. Lucia Grant was known for her fearlessness and impeccable diving skills. An acclaimed historian and professional diver, she had explored more than 100 shipwrecks worldwide, pulling back the curtain on forgotten maritime tales. Yet, none was as intriguing or as shrouded in superstition as the Lorelei. The Lorelei was a massive galleon that disappeared into the Atlantic in the late 1700s, leaving no survivors. From wharfside ghost stories to fishermen's lore, the ship was infamous for its spectral tales. Lucia, however, was a woman of logic and science, dismissing these eerie narratives as mere folklore. Equipped with state-of-the-art diving gear and her unflinching resolve, Lucia plunged into the ocean, the blue depths swallowing her whole. The cold water embraced her, the dim rays of sunlight painting a haunting image of the sunken ship. The Lorelei lay in its watery grave, a ghostly silhouette obscured by the dancing marine flora. As Lucia approached, she noticed an eerie stillness that consumed the sea life around. An oppressive silence pervaded the scene, broken only by the distant whispers of the sea. Descending further, she entered the ship, her flashlight casting long shadows in the creaky, barnacle-covered corridors. There, the air, or what should have been water, seemed to shift, to throb with an unearthly pulse. The ship was a desolate relic, yet it bristled with an uncanny vitality. Suddenly, spectral figures emerged from the walls, forming in the cold currents and the flickering light. Lucia froze, the water around her turning icy with fear. The spectral sailors were ensnared in time, their translucent figures mimicking the motions of sailing, eternally replaying the events leading to their doom. She watched, horrified, as the spectral crew ran across the deck, manning the non-existent sails, their ghastly shouts swallowed by the ocean's depths. Lucia tried to turn, to leave, but her movements felt sluggish, and her heart pounded in her chest. The ghostly crew's repetitive actions intensified, their panic manifesting as a frigid wave that swept across the Lorelei. Then, she saw him, the captain, more solid than the rest, his spectral figure marked with the scars of the sea. His gaze locked with hers, and a cold dread gripped Lucia. His eyes weren't simply reliving their fated journey but were alive, aware, seeing her. The captain reached for her, and Lucia kicked away, but the water around her had thickened, resisting her every move. His ghostly fingers brushed against her arm, a chilling sensation that gripped her very soul. As his touch landed, the ship around her transformed. The rotting wood sprang back to life, the ghostly crew solidified, their spectral wails turning into desperate, human screams. The illusion of the sea disappeared, and Lucia found herself on the thriving deck of the Lorelei, ensnared in a brutal storm. The spectral captain's grip tightened, his touch cold as the sea's abyss. His voice resonated in her mind, "Join us, Lucia. Join us in our eternal voyage." A wave of frigid water crashed into them, the Lorelei pitching violently. Lucia, drenched and freezing, screamed, struggling against the phantom grip. She pulled out her diving knife, plunging it into the spectral captain. He released her, a ghostly howl echoing through the chaos. Lucia tore away from him, stumbling toward the ship's edge. Her heartbeat roared in her ears, her breath hitched in her throat. With a final glance at the doomed crew, she leaped over the side of the ship, back into the tranquility of the sea. As she swam towards the surface, she felt the haunting presence of the Lorelei recede, the spectral screams fading into the depth. But her relief was fleeting. The icy touch of the spectral captain lingered, a chilling reminder of the eternal voyage she had narrowly escaped. Breaking the surface, Lucia gulped in the fresh air. The sunlight was a comforting balm against her chilled skin. The Lorelei lay beneath her, a cursed relic frozen in time. She stared at the calm sea, the ship's haunting apparitions imprinted forever in her memory. From that day forward, Lucia Grant was not only a historian and a diver. She was a survivor, a living testament to the haunting tale of the Lorelei, forever bound by the spectral touch of the drowned captain. She had faced the ethereal and emerged to tell the tale. The Lorelei was no longer a chapter of lore but a terrifying reality that rested in the abyss, forever replaying its nightmare, seeking to entrap unsuspecting souls into its eternal tragedy. In the shadows of her beauty, in the heart of the countryside, a grand old mansion stood untouched by time. It was home to Catherine, a woman whose beauty had the power to stun those who laid their eyes upon her. She had inherited the mansion from her great-grandmother, a woman with a history as cryptic as the mansion itself. At the heart of this history was an ornate, antique mirror passed down through generations. It was no ordinary mirror, it cast a shadowy reflection of a handsome man. He was Catherine's confidant, always ready with advice and comforting words during her hours of solitude. However, his nature was to change dramatically when Catherine fell in love with a local man named Samuel. The first incident was a subtle one. Samuel slipped down the grand staircase, just missing a broken neck. Catherine chalked it up to Samuel's clumsiness, but the shadowy man in the mirror seemed to shimmer with a sinister delight. As Catherine's relationship with Samuel blossomed, the accidents grew more frequent and deadly. A chandelier fell, just missing Samuel, brakes failed in his car, his dog mysteriously fell ill. Each time, the shadow man appeared triumphant, casting an aura of dread that Catherine could no longer ignore. One night, she confronted the shadow man. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. His reply, in a voice that echoed like a forgotten nightmare, sent chills down her spine. "You are mine, Catherine. Only mine." From that day forth, Catherine was tormented by the phantom. Her once peaceful home turned into a house of horror. She knew she had to unravel the mystery of the mirror before her life was entirely torn apart. Catherine began to dig through her great-grandmother's belongings. Among the dusty books and trinkets, she found a diary filled with her great-grandmother's scrawled writings. As she leafed through the pages, the truth of the mirror slowly unfolded. The man in the mirror was once a suitor of her great-grandmother, a man obsessed, filled with a desire that was not returned. He was cursed, imprisoned in the mirror by a mystic who had seen the danger in his obsession. Over time, his love had turned into a possessive madness, threatening any who dared to share affections with the women of the family line. The diary also held a solution. To break the curse, Catherine needed to show the man in the mirror the nature of his toxic love and offer him unconditional forgiveness. The task seemed impossible, but Catherine was not one to back down. With resolution in her heart, Catherine stood before the mirror. She recounted tales of her great-grandmother's sorrow for having to curse him, the loneliness of the women in her family, and the fear she herself felt. She spoke of love, not as possession, but as selflessness, as wanting happiness for the other, even if it meant letting go. The mirror shimmered, the handsome man appeared with rage in his eyes. But Catherine did not back down. She laid bare her own feelings for Samuel, her hope for a peaceful life with him. She then looked directly into the shadow man's eyes and said, "I forgive you." Suddenly, the mirror rippled like disturbed water, and the man's figure convulsed. The rage in his eyes was replaced by confusion, then realization, and finally, sorrow. The mirror returned to normal, reflecting only Catherine's determined face. The shadow man was gone. The mansion seemed to breathe a sigh of relief, the oppressive atmosphere lifting. Catherine felt a strange sense of loss but also overwhelming relief. She was free from the curse, free to live her life with Samuel without the specter of jealousy hanging over them. In the shadows of her beauty was no longer a tale of fear but one of liberation and love. And Catherine, in her beautiful, timeless mansion, would be a testament to that love for years to come. A concern about Mary. In the idyllic coastal town of Silver Cove, every day was kissed by sunshine, the breeze was mild, and the sea was as calm as glass. But then the storm came, and it refused to leave. It started subtly, first with the incessant rain, then the winds, and before long, thunder roared like never before, and lightning streaked across the sky. The townsfolk were terrified, But one person seemed more terrified than the rest: Mary, the town's red-headed teenager. The tempest mirrored Mary's emotions, an outward manifestation of her inner turmoil. She discovered she had telekinetic powers and could control the elements, but as a scared teenager, she was not able to control her own fear, and it began to wreak havoc on Silver Cove. "Look, I don't want to believe it, but it's clear," said her best friend, Daisy, one day when the rain was particularly intense. "Your powers are causing the storm." Mary, staring out of the window at the tumultuous sea, nodded, her fiery hair sticking to her wet face. "I know, Daisy. I know." Rumors had begun to spread across the town. The once peaceful townsfolk now viewed Mary with fear in their eyes. The little redhead, who once was adored, was now an anomaly they couldn't understand. She felt their fear, their distrust, and it fueled the storm. One evening, as the sky grew darker, a warning blared on the local radio station. A hurricane was approaching Silver Cove. It was predicted to be catastrophic, and the town could be wiped off the map. Her family and friends rallied around her, braving the fearful whispers of the town. They knew if anyone had the power to stop the disaster, it was Mary. They assembled in the town's rustic church, its stained glass windows rattling with each thunderclap. Her grandmother, a wise old woman, was the first to speak, her voice firm and soothing. "Mary, you have been blessed with a power, a gift. It's not something to fear. You must control it, not let it control you." "But how, Nana?" Mary whimpered, her emerald eyes glistening with unshed tears. "How do I control something so big?" A sudden flash of lightning illuminated a figure entering the church. The town's outcast, an old seafarer named Captain Jasper, walked down the aisle, his presence commanding attention. "I may have an idea," he said, his voice gruff yet kind. He told them about his voyages, about the stillness within the eye of the storm. "To find peace, you must venture into the storm, not run from it." With a resolute nod, Mary decided to do just that. Hand in hand with her friends and family, she walked into the heart of the storm, her heart thudding in her chest. Mary closed her eyes, trying to imagine the calm at the center of a hurricane, just as Captain Jasper had described. She breathed in the salty air, the rain soaking her to the bone. She let the wind whip her hair, the thunder echo in her ears. She embraced the storm, accepted it, and sought the tranquility within. Slowly, the tempest responded. The winds began to subside. The torrential rain turned into a drizzle, then stopped. The ominous clouds receded, revealing the star-studded sky. Mary opened her eyes, a serene smile on her face. Silver Cove was quiet once again. The hurricane had dissipated, and the town was safe. Mary, standing in the now placid town square, felt a sense of peace. She had found control. The storm had passed, but Silver Cove was forever changed. The town that was once known for its perfect weather was now known for something much more: the strength and courage of a redhead teenager named Mary. From then on, the townsfolk of Silver Cove no longer feared the storm but revered the calm within it, embodied by their very own heroine. Zombie Bride. In the small, countryside town of Meadowlark, fear clung to every hushed whisper about the old Burnham mansion. Despite being engulfed in a fire decades ago, the mansion continued to burn, the crimson flames flickering ominously against the night sky. Legend told of the mansion's former mistress, a pitiful bride ensnared in a loveless marriage, dying in the initial fire's wrath. It was said that her undying rage transformed her into a monstrous apparition, haunting the burning mansion in her grotesque bridal gown. A group of urban explorers, Cam, Elise, Jason, and Myra, captivated by the chilling tales, arrived at Meadowlark. The Burnham Mansion, an infernal beacon in the moonlit night, was an irresistible lure for their thrill-seeking hearts. Arrogantly disregarding the warnings from the wary townsfolk, they stepped over the threshold into the mansion, sealing their fate. As they navigated the labyrinthine mansion, the haunting wail of a weeping woman echoed through the halls. They followed the sound, hearts pounding, until they found themselves in a grand ballroom, dancing flames illuminating the morbid scene. At the center stood the spectral figure of the bride, her decaying body clad in a once lavish wedding dress, now a gruesome mockery of her past. Suddenly, the air thickened with bitterness, and the mansion came alive with a fierce energy. The bride's hate-filled gaze met theirs, and a chilling voice echoed, "You dare trespass into my torment? Endure my pain, experience my betrayal." Suddenly, the explorers found themselves living the bride's memories. Cam felt the suffocating confines of a loveless marriage, Elise experienced the searing pain of betrayal, Jason was plagued by the endless loneliness, and Myra endured the horrifying death by fire. The bride's raw emotions threatened to consume them, binding them to the mansion. Reality crashed back as they returned to the ballroom, gasping and trembling. Their torment had given them a glimpse into the bride's suffering. Myra, a scholar of the occult, realized the only way out was to break the cycle of hate that held the bride captive. A plan was formed, one that required confronting the source of the bride's betrayal. Through research and the townsfolk's hushed whispers, they discovered her husband's unmarked grave, located in the mansion's forgotten cemetery. In the dead of night, under the shadow of the burning mansion, they performed a ritual to summon the spirit of the husband. He appeared, a man bearing aristocratic elegance, yet radiating a chilling aura. The explorers pleaded their case, but the spirit scoffed, remorseless. "Do you think I owe her anything?" he sneered, his icy voice echoing through the darkness. "She was a mere object, a pawn for my reputation." Rage boiled within the explorers, mirroring the bride's own. Jason, driven by the empathy he'd experienced, lunged at the spirit, anger in his eyes. "You caused this. You owe her peace." His words echoed in the silent cemetery, leaving a profound impact on the spirit, who showed a flicker of realization. His arrogant facade crumbled as he admitted, "Maybe I do." Under the spectral moonlight, the spirit of the husband was led back to the mansion. The reunion of the bride and her traitorous spouse was a scene of icy tension. He confessed his wrongdoings, begging for her forgiveness. The bride, after a long silence, let out a sigh that echoed with centuries of suffering. "I forgive you," she whispered, her vengeful rage extinguishing, replaced with a serene calmness. As her words echoed, the eternal flames around the mansion flickered out, the mansion's cursed existence meeting its end. The spectral bride and her spouse faded away, leaving the mansion in silence. The explorers breathed a sigh of relief, their escape secured. In the heart of Meadowlark, the Burnham mansion stood silent, its tormentor finally at peace. The explorers left the town, their minds bearing the haunting memories of the unholy matrimony. The tale of the Burnham mansion became a reminder of love turned sour and the disastrous consequences it bore. The town's hushed whispers turned into sighs of relief, the haunting glow of the mansion finally extinguished, leaving behind darkness and an unforgettable tale.
Zombie on my ship. Every sea voyage begins with the promise of escape, but I was soon to learn this journey offered no escape from the horrors that lurk in the shadowed corners of the world. As the ship's doctor, I had the responsibility of ensuring health and well-being of the crew and passengers. Little did I know the ship would become a living nightmare. Just a few days into our voyage, a passenger named Edgar fell critically ill. His symptoms were peculiar: high fever, delirium, and an unquenchable thirst. By dawn, a shocking transformation had taken hold. His once hazel eyes were clouded with a milky white glaze. His skin, sickly pale and speckled with an unsettling greenish hue, had turned as cold as the icy sea that surrounded us. He had become something not quite living, yet not entirely dead. He was, by all accounts, a zombie. Edgar was docile in the darkness, but with the first rays of the sun, he became wild and uncontrollable, a daylight terror. Each morning, I had to sedate him in order to prevent an uproar among the passengers. The threat of exposure grew with each passing day. I was trapped in a perilous dance, constantly spinning between trying to diagnose this ghastly affliction and hiding the truth of his condition. I scoured through the medical textbooks in my library, desperate for some sort of explanation or solution, but the books yielded nothing that matched Edgar's symptoms. I was sailing in uncharted waters, grasping at theories while trying to keep my fears at bay. My only clue came from Edgar's delirious mutterings about an old sea legend, a tale of the ship of the dead, cursed by an ancient god to sail the oceans forever, turning any man who encountered it into a creature of the undead. Meanwhile, Edgar's condition worsened. He began to smell of decaying flesh, and his mind deteriorated further. He would scream and thrash violently at the sight of daylight, prompting terrified questions from the crew. I brushed it off as a severe case of an unknown tropical disease, requiring quarantine, but I could see the doubt growing in their eyes. The situation came to a head one sunny morning when Edgar, somehow breaking free from his restraints, lunged at one of the ship's stewards, his jaws snapping voraciously. I managed to subdue him just in time, but the incident intensified the passengers' fear and suspicion. In desperation, I turned to the law of the sea. I pored over Edgar's tale of the ship of the dead, and the curse it carried. The legend suggested a reversal of the curse, a sacrifice to the sea god, an offer of something precious. I pondered over what it could be, and then it struck me, it was the promise of life. I went to Edgar, carrying a pet canary that chirped brightly in its cage. I spoke to him, hoping some human part of him was still conscious, explaining my plan. His glazed eyes seemed to focus slightly, giving me a glimmer of hope. As dawn broke the following day, I held the canary cage aloft, the bird fluttering and squawking in fear. With a whispered apology, I released the bird into the salty sea air. It circled above us once, then twice, before finally disappearing into the sunrise. The transformation was miraculous. Edgar's skin regained some of its color, the decay halted, and the crazed look in his eyes dimmed. It took several more days and canaries, but each sunrise brought less of the monster and more of the man. By the time we sighted land, Edgar had returned completely to his human state. Relief washed over me as the ship docked. I helped Edgar disembark, his steps shaky but certain. As we parted, he turned to me, his hazel eyes filled with gratitude and a hint of sadness. "Thank you, Doctor," he said, his voice a hoarse whisper, "for saving me and them." As the ship emptied, I was left alone, a chill running down my spine. I had contained the terror, saved Edgar, and kept the passengers safe. But I was haunted by the terrible truth that the sea was vast, and the ship of the dead still sailed its waters, waiting to claim its next victim.
Thank you for watching, and remember the darkness awaits. Until our paths cross again, stay fearful and stay subscribed.